The most persistent rumor about the Process Church is also the least proven, that it helped shape or somehow belonged behind the crimes of the Manson family. The association grew from a disturbing overlap of images, locations, counterculture networks, and sensational reporting. But when the record is separated from the mythology, a more unsettling truth appears. The Process Church was controversial and psychologically intense, yet the alleged bridge to Charles Manson was far weaker than the public believed. The Process Church of the Final Judgment emerged during the 1960s, a period when many Americans were questioning established religion, authority, family structures, and social norms. Its theology was deliberately provocative. It placed Christ, Satan, Lucifer, and Jehovah within a single religious framework, presenting opposing forces as part of a larger spiritual drama. To outsiders, this sounded like satanic worship. To followers, it was a radical attempt to explain conflict, judgment, and reconciliation. The group also cultivated a striking public identity. Members often wore dark clothing, maintained a disciplined appearance, and presented themselves with solemn confidence. Their churches and communities could seem closed, mysterious, and difficult to interpret. In an era already frightened by social change, unusual religious language became evidence of danger in the public imagination. The gap between what the Process Church claimed to believe and what outsiders assumed it believed became central to its notoriety. Its internal structure intensified that gap. Like many high-control religious groups, it offered certainty to people living through confusion. A charismatic leader is not simply a compelling speaker. It is a person whose personal authority becomes more important than independent judgment. In groups organized around such authority, belief can become obedience, and obedience can gradually become a test of loyalty. The Process Church's disciplined spiritual system made that possibility difficult for outsiders to dismiss. Recruitment often depended on emotional need rather than abstract theology. Some seekers were searching for belonging, purpose, or a break from ordinary life. Love bombing, a manipulation tactic in which newcomers receive unusually intense attention, praise, and acceptance, can make a group feel like a refuge before its demands become clear. The new member may interpret the sudden warmth as proof of special destiny, while the group interprets that attachment as an opening for deeper control. This does not mean every member entered under deception, or that every religious practice within the Process Church produced criminal behavior. It does mean that social pressure can operate without visible violence. A person who gives up old relationships, accepts the group's vocabulary, and relies on its leaders for meaning may begin to lose the ability to evaluate the group from outside. The process is gradual. That is what makes it difficult to recognize while it is happening. Psychologists describe one part of this trap as cognitive dissonance. It is the mental strain produced when a person's actions conflict with their beliefs or self-image. If a follower sacrifices money, safety, or family ties for a movement, admitting that the movement may be harmful becomes emotionally painful. The sacrifice itself can then feel like evidence that the cause must be valuable. Commitment reinforces belief, even when experience begins to contradict it. The Manson family occupied a different social and psychological world, although both groups existed within the same turbulent American counterculture. Charles Manson gathered followers through personal influence, emotional manipulation, drug use, apocalyptic ideas, and a relentless reshaping of reality around himself. The family became a closed social unit whose members were encouraged to accept Manson's interpretations over ordinary moral and social boundaries. Its crimes were documented in police investigations and court proceedings. The critical question is not whether Manson and the Process Church shared a dark aesthetic. They did not share a proven command structure. The question is whether Process members directed, trained, or inspired the Manson family's murders. Available reporting and historical research do not establish that connection. The link was largely constructed from coincidence, rumor, and the era's readiness to treat unconventional religious groups as parts of one hidden satanic network. Why then did the story survive? One reason was proximity. The Process Church maintained a presence in American cities and interacted with counterculture communities. Manson also moved through those same broad social environments. When people saw overlapping circles, they often assumed operational ties. But social contact is not proof of conspiracy, and cultural similarity is not evidence of shared responsibility. Another reason was language. The Process Church openly used the names Christ and Satan in its theology, while Manson used apocalyptic and religious imagery to control his followers. To journalists and frightened observers, those words seem to confirm a common ideology. Yet the same vocabulary can serve very different purposes. A church's formal doctrine, however disturbing, is not automatically equivalent to a leader's private commands or a criminal group's behavior. The Manson murders transformed that confusion into a national fear. The public was confronted with young followers who had surrendered ordinary judgment to a powerful leader. The case became a warning about manipulation, but it also encouraged broad suspicion toward unfamiliar religions. This atmosphere helped produce what later became known as the Satanic Panic, a wave of fear in which unsupported claims about satanic conspiracies were treated as credible despite weak or non-existent evidence. The Process Church became an ideal target for that panic. Its name suggested final judgment. Its theology mentioned Satan. Its members appeared secretive. Those facts were repeatedly placed beside the Manson family's crimes until association began to sound like proof. The process was psychologically simple. Frightening details were gathered, uncertainty was removed, and a complicated history was reduced to a single sinister explanation. Sensational accounts also benefited from ambiguity. The less the public understood the Process Church, the easier it was to project fears onto it. A group that explained its beliefs in unfamiliar terms could be portrayed as hiding something. A group that dressed differently could be described as signaling allegiance. In this environment, absence of evidence did not calm suspicion. It was reinterpreted as evidence of concealment. The deeper danger was not only reputational. High control groups can harm members through isolation, financial dependence, fear, humiliation, and the erosion of personal autonomy. Even when the most dramatic allegations are untrue, those mechanisms deserve examination on their own terms. Attaching unsupported crimes to a group can actually obscure documented psychological harm by replacing careful analysis with a sensational accusation. For people trying to leave such environments, exit counseling refers to a structured process of helping former members examine beliefs, relationships, and experiences after separation from a controlling group. It is not a magic cure, and poorly conducted interventions can create further trauma. Effective support generally respects the former member's autonomy while offering factual information, emotional care, and time to rebuild independent judgment. The Process Church did not become the Manson family. That conclusion matters because historical accuracy protects victims and prevents new forms of manipulation. The Manson family's crimes belong to its own documented chain of leadership, coercion, and action. The Process Church's history belongs to a separate record of unconventional theology, disciplined communal life, public suspicion, and alleged psychological pressure that must be assessed without invented connections. There is also a moral danger in treating darkness as an aesthetic category. Black clothing, apocalyptic names, and references to Satan can look terrifying, but appearance cannot establish criminal conduct. At the same time, rejecting sensational rumors should not mean ignoring the realities of control. A group can be wrongly accused of murder and still deserve serious questions about authority, dependency, and the treatment of dissent. The public link between the Process Church and Charles Manson therefore reveals more than a disputed footnote. It shows how fear builds narratives. A controversial church, a notorious criminal group, and a frightened society were placed into one story because the story felt emotionally satisfying. It offered a hidden enemy and a simple explanation for shocking crimes. The evidence, however, remains more limited and more complicated. What survives is a caution about certainty. The process. Church's unusual beliefs made it vulnerable to satanic panic, while Manson's documented manipulation demonstrated how quickly spiritual language can be turned into an instrument of control. Their alleged connection was exaggerated, but the mechanisms that made the rumor persuasive were real. Isolation, authority, emotional dependency, and the human need to make terror intelligible. In the end, the question is not whether the Process Church secretly controlled Charles Manson. The evidence does not support that claim. The more important question is why so many people accepted it. The answer lies between public fear and private power, between religious experimentation and coercive influence, and between what can be proven in records and what a frightened culture wants to believe. Subscribe.